Shinya was an ordinary orphan boy who died accidentally and was reincarnated into a new world ruled by gods, where 7 gods bestowed upon him power beyond imagination, making him the most powerful human ever. One day while walking home, Shinya noticed chaos outside a small store. People were rushing out in panic and 2 young girls stumbled right in front of him. A thief, waving a knife, charged toward them. Most people would have run, but not Shinya. Without hesitation, he tackled the man to the ground, shouting for the girls to run. Before he knew it, pain shot through his stomach as he struggled, and blood began to flow, forcing the bandit to flee in fear. In those final moments, Shinya felt a bittersweet pride. He had saved them, but at a cost he hadn't expected. Darkness crept in and his consciousness began to fade. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the familiar streets of his old world. A maid knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face, calling him Cain. Confused, Shinya, now a young boy named Cain, was hugged by a woman asking if he remembered his mother. Everything felt completely wrong. A glance in the mirror sent his heart racing. Staring back was the face of a young child, one that wasn't his own. The maid guessed his fever had scrambled his memory, and while she prepared him some soup, Cain's mind raced. How had he ended up like this? Was this some kind of anime reincarnation? Determined to make sense of his new reality, Cain inspected the room, hoping to find hidden weapons or treasures. Instead, he learned his new identity: Cain von Silford, a 3-year-old child born to Garm and Sarah, with a sister named Ren. His father, a high-ranking margrave, commanded an army to protect the kingdom from a monstrous forest. Magic, monsters, and adventures weren't just stories, they were real and he could learn it all. Excited, Cain began studying immediately. With guidance from the maid, Sylvia, he learned to read and soon discovered he could already wield magic. Flames danced from his hands as he tested his limits, and he realized he was living a fantasy every otaku dreams about. While mastering these powers, his sister Rin caught him sneaking around, learning about the outside world, and from that moment on, she taught him everything about adventurers, monsters, and the kingdom's history. Years passed, and the day of his official baptism arrived. Dressed in ceremonial garb, Cain marveled at the medieval world around him. Horse-drawn carriages, bustling towns, and the blessings of the gods themselves. At the church, pillars of divine light shone down, teleporting him before all 7 gods. They welcomed him by his original name, Shinya, which only added to his confusion. Cain soon learned the truth. His death had earned him a second chance, and the gods had bestowed upon him incredible power to protect this world. Even as Cain processed this overwhelming revelation, he couldn't help but chuckle. In his last life, he had died trying to save 2 girls, and now, in this new world, he had been given the chance to become something extraordinary. The journey had just begun, and the adventures of Cain von Silford were only getting started. After dying while doing something good, Cain's life didn't just end, it restarted. The gods decided he deserved another shot and reincarnated him into a whole new world. Cain's not complaining. This time, he's born into a warm, loving family, and can finally use magic, something he's always dreamed of. The god of magic, Reno, blesses him with immense magical power. Then Zenim steps in and gives him protection too, along with the god of war, making Cain one of the most overpowered warriors ever born. The god of technology even upgrades his brain so he can stop thinking about girls 24/7. And to top it off, the god of commerce grants him a judgment ability and an item box, basically turning him into a future billionaire. When Zenim laughs and sends him back, the temple statues glow brighter than anyone's ever seen. The priest freaks out and begs to check Cain's status right away, but Cain senses something's off and rushes to the bathroom to look for himself. What he sees nearly makes him faint. Every one of his divine protections is maxed out at level 10, double the highest level in the world. Knowing how dangerous that looks, Cain uses a hidden skill called Status Conceal to hide his powers. Later that night, his family gathers for his birthday dinner. When his father asks to see his status, Cain reluctantly shows it, and everyone's jaws drop. He's blessed by all 7 gods, and his magic level? Over 340,000. At just 5 years old, he's already stronger than most royal mages in the entire kingdom. His father panics and makes him swear to keep everything secret. That night, Cain sits in his room staring at a book about summoning magic. With no one around, he decides to give it a try, just for fun. But instead of summoning a cute animal, a massive monster bursts out of the circle. His sister screams, and the scene feels just like a nightmare he remembers from another life. This time, though, he swears things will end differently. The monster strikes, crushing him to the ground. Blood spills, pain floods in, but Cain doesn't back down. He refuses to let anyone cry for him again. Using every ounce of his strength, he casts one final spell that obliterates the creature. As his vision fades, he sees a pair of soft cat ears and wishes he could have touched them, just once. Then everything goes dark. A few minutes later, Cain opens his eyes, still alive. No one's crying. No one's hurt. For the first time, he realizes that his power isn't a curse. It's a chance to actually protect people. Later, during his debut ceremony, Cain stands proudly before a crowd and reveals his dream, to become an adventurer who protects everyone. His father, Garm, encourages him to study more if he truly wants to achieve that goal, arranging for a tutor to guide his training. Later, Cain sits in his room reading, wondering what kind of person his tutor will be. Soon, his tutors arrive. Millie, who nervously introduces herself, and Nina, who gives a short and formal greeting. Millie scolds Nina for being too blunt with a noble, but Cain quickly tells them they don't need to be formal around him since they'll be training together. His relaxed attitude puts them at ease. Garm instructs the tutors to teach Cain for the next 3 years, and they immediately begin. At the training grounds, Millie asks Cain to show some sword swings, but she's stunned by how naturally skilled he is. Nina jokes that Cain might actually be better than Millie, making her flustered. To prove herself, Millie challenges Cain to a mock battle. Cain rushes in, his attacks so strong that Millie struggles to block them. Nina asks if he has the blessing of the god of war, and Cain admits that he does. Realizing she can't keep up, Millie steps back and tells Nina to take over and start teaching him magic. Nina reveals that she has a level 3 blessing from the god of magic and plans to start with the basics. But Cain surprises her by saying he already knows them. To prove it, he casts beginner-level magic with ease. Nina is shocked when she realizes he just used enchanted magic, something that usually takes years of training to master. She concludes that Cain is a prodigy. Millie adds that he even used multiple elements, which is supposed to be impossible. Cain then admits he also has the blessing of the god of magic, leaving both tutors speechless. Their shock deepens when Cain casually offers them towels from his item box. They realize he's far beyond their teaching ability, and that if they continue training inside the mansion, his magic might destroy it. They explain the situation to Garm, asking permission to train him outside. The next day, they head beyond the mansion grounds. Nina instructs Cain to use an intermediate-level spell on a boulder. He casts a fire spell, and it explodes with massive force, blowing the tutors off their feet and leaving a huge crater behind. Nina notes that the spell was far beyond intermediate level, while Millie wonders how Cain isn't even tired. They conclude that his mana reserves are abnormally high. Suddenly, a killer rabbit jumps out to attack. Cain swiftly dodges and counterattacks with wind magic, defeating it instantly. He stores its remains in his item box to show his family later. Millie sighs, wishing she had a magic bag like his. Nina then uses a search spell to detect nearby monsters, and Cain, curious, asks to learn it. After a brief explanation, he tries it himself, successfully detecting and identifying every nearby creature. The group hunts down the monsters, but when one flees into the forest, Millie quickly stops him. She warns that the forest is filled with strong monsters that occasionally try to invade the city, which is why it's so heavily fortified. That evening, Cain checks his status and realizes he's already reached level 8. He discovers it's because of a skill that multiplies his experience gained by 100 times. Frustrated, he blames the gods for making him so overpowered. Later, they visit the Adventurers Guild to look for a quest. Inside, a muscular man mocks Millie and Nina for being D-rank adventurers and babysitting a child. He arrogantly tells Millie to serve him a drink, but when she refuses and Nina stands up for her, he grabs Nina while his companions hold Millie back. Cain immediately steps in, slapping the man's hand away and sending him crashing to the floor in pain. The man, furious, attacks, but Cain easily dodges every strike. Catching the man's sword with 2 fingers, Cain throws him out of the guild. When his companions threaten Millie, Cain charges at them and tosses them outside as well. Millie and Nina thank him, impressed not only by his power but also by his combat skill. Cain modestly explains that he learned martial arts just by reading books. The group continues training near the forest for the next 3 years. When their contract ends, Cain decides to thank his tutors for everything. Remembering that Millie once wanted a magic bag, he ventures into the forest to gather materials. There, he easily defeats high-level monsters, battles that would normally require an entire A-rank party. The city guards, seeing the massive fire pillars from afar, mistake them for a monster invasion and sound the alarm. Garm rushes to the forest with his soldiers but instead finds a massive crater left by Cain's training. When Cain returns, he gifts Millie and Nina the magic bags he crafted himself, explaining that each can even hold an entire mansion. The two are astonished, calling the items more valuable than national treasures. They part ways fondly, grateful for their time together. 2 years later, Cain is now 10 years old. He travels with his father and guards to the royal capital for his noble debut, a required event for all noble sons. Garm tells him the journey will take about a week if there are no monster attacks. Along the way, Cain uses his search ability and detects a group of people being attacked by monsters 3 kilometers ahead. Garm orders his men to hurry, but Cain knows they won't make it in time. Acting on his own, he leaps from the carriage, boosts his speed with magic and rushes ahead. At the scene, a soldier is desperately protecting a royal carriage when Cain arrives, cutting through the monsters with ease and defeating their leader with a fiery sword strike. He introduces himself as the son of Garm and heals the wounded soldiers with a spell. When Garm arrives, he finds that the battle is already over. The carriage door opens, revealing Princess Celestia and Silk, the Duke's daughter. They thank Cain for saving them, explaining they watched everything from inside their carriage. Celestia faints from exhaustion, and Cain casts a calming spell to help her recover. Both girls start to take an interest in him, and Silk asks why he's traveling. Cain explains he's on his way to the capital for his debut, and the girls reveal that they'll be attending theirs as well. They decide to travel together, and Cain finds himself seated between the 2 girls in the royal carriage. Feeling awkward, he tries to switch seats, but they won't let him. When they arrive at a nearby town, the girls insist he stay in their room for the night since they feel safer around him. Garm objects, saying it's inappropriate, but the girls argue they're still shaken from the monster attack. Reluctantly, Cain agrees, on the condition that the room is large enough. When they enter, he realizes the beds are far too close together. The girls smile and tell him to sleep in the middle. As the girls move their beds closer to Cain's, they huddle beside him, saying they're still scared from the attack. Cain grows increasingly nervous, unable to sleep at all. This continues for several nights, leaving him exhausted by the time they finally reach the royal capital. When they step out of the carriage, they're greeted by the vice captain, Gazard, who thanks Cain for saving the princess and her companion. Cain respectfully removes the remains of the fallen guards from his item box, asking that they be honored for their bravery in protecting the royal carriage. As Cain prepares to leave, Gazard stops him, explaining that the king wishes to meet him personally. He escorts Cain to the royal hall, where the king acknowledges his heroic actions and declares that without Cain's help, the princesses wouldn't have survived. As a reward, the king bestows upon him the noble title of Baron and grants him his own mansion. A noble named Corgino objects, saying Cain is too young to hold such a title, but the king reminds him that even he couldn't accomplish what Cain has. Reluctantly, Corgino stays quiet. Cain humbly accepts the title, and the king concludes the ceremony. Backstage, Cain meets with his father, who proudly tells him that he's the first among his sons to ever be promoted. The king soon joins them, bowing his head in gratitude and thanking Cain for saving his daughter. Embarrassed, Cain asks him to rise, but the king insists on expressing his thanks as a father, not just a ruler. The king explains that because Cain has exceptional talent in both swordsmanship and magic, and carries the blessings of multiple gods, the kingdom can't allow such a gifted person to act independently. To ensure he stays within the royal circle, the king proposes that Cain marry Princess Celestia. The Duke steps in as well, suggesting Cain marry his daughter, Silk. Cain is shocked by the sudden proposal, but both girls are overjoyed. The king and Duke then reveal their true plan. Since Cain spent several nights with the girls, it would be improper for him not to take responsibility. They pressure him into accepting the engagement, and overwhelmed by the situation, Cain reluctantly agrees to marry both. Later, Cain visits the capital's main church and prays to the gods, who allow him to enter their realm once again. He asks them about his stats, and the god Xenom confirms that his power levels are beyond anything humanly possible, making him one of the strongest beings alive. Xenom even offers to make him a demigod but warns him that no matter how strong he becomes, there are still limits to what he can do alone. Xenom suggests that Cain use his knowledge from his previous life to create new inventions to entertain himself in this world. Cain likes the idea and decides to introduce an item that doesn't exist here. Returning to the mortal world, Cain encounters a cat girl named Parma, who tells him she's training at her uncle Tamanis' shop. Cain visits the shop and is impressed by the variety of goods available. He explains his invention idea, sketching out the design and details. Tamanis is intrigued and confident he can make it affordably. Cain gives him a gold coin as an investment to cover the prototype costs. and Tamanis gladly accepts the challenge. After some time, Tamanis presents the prototype. Kane is pleased with the result and demonstrates how it works by playing a game with Parma. Excited, Tamanis predicts that the invention will become a huge success. Kane suggests creating a premium version for nobles since they'll likely want something more elegant. He funds the production and tells Tamanis to start mass manufacturing immediately. Overwhelmed by Kane's trust, Tamanis vows to give his best effort. Together, they take the prototype to the altar and swear before the god of commerce to uphold their agreement. The prototype vanishes in divine light, confirming the contract. Now, no one else can produce the same product for 3 years. Kane instructs Tamanis to begin selling within a month and to craft an extravagant version for the royal family. Afterwards, Kane returns home, where he learns that his debut ceremony is about to begin. He quickly gets ready and heads out with his parents. Garm warns him to be cautious, knowing that other nobles will likely try to introduce their daughters to him now that he's a baron. When they arrive at the venue, the royal family makes their entrance, and the king delivers a speech about the next generation of nobles. Kane presents his new invention to the king, who takes great interest and tells him they'll discuss it further after the ceremony. Garm, unaware of his son's business venture, is surprised. Kane explains that he needs to find new sources of income to maintain his estate. His parents then leave him to mingle with the other young nobles. Kane joins Silk, who starts teasing him playfully, but their conversation is interrupted by Corgino's son, Habit. He flatters Silk, expecting her to respond in kind, but she politely ignores him. One of Habit's friends demands that Kane show respect to Habit. Kane introduces himself properly as Baron Kane, but they assume he's just the son of a baron and begin mocking him. Habit arrogantly claims that Kane must be from a poor family and threatens to have his friends beat him if he doesn't apologize. Kane calmly tells Habit that he's the one being rude, which provokes Habit into challenging him to a duel. Outside, Habit's friends boast that they have divine blessings and can use magic. The first conjures a small fireball, which Kane easily dodges. The next one tries to attack with weak rock projectiles, but Kane avoids those two without effort. Before they can continue, Silk intervenes, clearly annoyed. She reveals that Kane isn't just a baron's son. He is the baron himself, the very one who saved the princesses and earned his title through his own achievements. Shocked, the boys immediately bow and beg for forgiveness before running off. Silk then turns to Kane and remarks that he has a bit of a dark side, letting the misunderstanding play out just to see how things unfold. Kane doesn't deny it, and Silk promises to keep it a secret from Telestia, on one condition, that he takes her on a date. Just then, Telestia approaches, curious about what happened. Silk quickly changes the subject and tells her that she and Kane are going on a date. Telestia instantly gets jealous when she hears about Kane's date with Silk. So, to calm her down, Kane quickly promises that he'll also go on a date with her. But before anything romantic happens, the king interrupts, summoning Kane for a meeting. During the meeting, they start playing the board game Kane invented. The king loves it so much he wants to keep it exclusively for himself. But Kane admits that it'll soon be available to the public, and the king's dream of being the only player dies right there. The duke's also present, and both he and the king remind Kane that his engagement with their daughters is still a secret. They warn him to be careful on his upcoming dates. The next day, Kane receives the official deed and key to his new mansion. Excited, he heads over to check it out, only to find the place completely run down. It's dark, dusty, and looks straight out of a haunted movie. He lights up the place with magic and walks through every room, realizing it's all filthy and empty. But Kane doesn't care. He waves his hand, uses magic, and boom, everything's spotless, repaired, and sparkling new in seconds. His magic home makeover is complete. Soon, a familiar face shows up. It's his maid, Sylvia. She's thrilled to be working for him again. Alongside her is his new butler, Colin, who politely introduces himself. Sylvia gets straight to work, ordering the maids to clean up, but they're shocked to find the place already spotless. Kane awkwardly admits he already did it all with magic. Colin reminds Kane that his family's waiting, which makes him realize his older brothers are coming home. When they arrive, everyone's impressed that Kane already got his own mansion and became a baron so quickly. His sister Rain wants to visit, though her brothers warn her the place might be haunted since it used to be so run down. But when they get there, everyone's jaw drops. The mansion is absolutely perfect. Kane's father, Garm, is stunned. It used to be falling apart the last time he saw it. He quickly figures out that Kane must have fixed it with magic. They're all impressed by the rooms, though Garm points out that it's missing one thing: art. Kane's confused why he needs it, so his dad explains that nobles love decorating their mansions with fancy stuff like paintings, armor, and even mounted monsters. Right as he says that, Kane's like, "Wait, I got something cool," and places one of his own monsters on display. Suddenly, Sylvia screams. The maids rush in, panicking. They've just seen an enormous red dragon mounted on the wall. Kane facepalms, realizing he forgot to warn them about that. Garm demands an explanation and Kane casually says, "Oh, that's just a monster I beat a while ago." Everyone stares at him in shock. His dad explains that a red dragon is considered a calamity-level monster, something even top-ranked adventurers can't defeat. He then tells Kane that a single red dragon would be worth about 1,000 platinum coins, roughly $100 million. Kane's eyes nearly pop out of his head. Suddenly, another scream echoes through the house. They rush over to find Kane's mother and sister staring at the bathroom. Turns out, Kane made a magical toilet that sprays water, and they've never seen anything like it. Kane proudly explains how it works, and Rain immediately asks him to install one at their house. Garm calls them dramatic for overreacting to a toilet, until he tries it himself. The moment he sits down, his whole attitude changes. Now he wants one too. Then his dad tells him that since he's been given a mansion, it's tradition for him to host a debut party to show it off. Kane is horrified. Another debut already? That night, he stresses over what to do, but Colin's already on top of it. He's prepared a full guest list and checklist. Kane scans the list and groans when he sees Corgino's name. Colin explains that skipping a high-ranking noble like him would be bad manners. Kane also notices the king isn't on the list, but Colin clarifies that only top-tier nobles can invite him directly. Kane starts planning the food and drinks, but then remembers he needs gifts for everyone too. Sylvia gives him an idea, so he creates something new using magic: glass cups. Since most nobles only use porcelain, this will totally stand out. Next, he cooks up a meal from his past life: Hamburg steak. Sylvia takes one bite and immediately melts. It's so good. Then she tries his fizzy drink, amazed by the bubbles. Kane explains it's just regular wine he made sparkle with magic. Colin interrupts, saying the king is calling for him. Kane hurries to the palace, where the king is mad he didn't get an invite to the debut. Turns out, the duke's been teasing him non-stop about it. Thinking fast, Kane says he wanted to deliver the invitation in person. The king instantly softens, thrilled to be invited, and Kane breathes a sigh of relief. When the night of the party arrives, nobles start filling the mansion. The duke and Silk show up first, amazed by the mounted red dragon. Kane thanks everyone for coming and makes a toast. Everyone tries his sparkling wine and loves it. The duke even comments that the glasses shine like treasure. Then the king arrives, telling everyone to relax and enjoy themselves. He tastes the drink, loves it, and then tries the Hamburg steak, finding it rich, juicy, and perfectly cheesy inside. Out of nowhere, the queen rushes out of the bathroom yelling about how amazing Kane's toilet is, calling it revolutionary. She demands one for the palace. The king tries it out and instantly agrees, ordering Kane to install one immediately. The nobles cheer, praising Kane's hospitality and innovation. But then Colin whispers that Corgino has just arrived. Corgino barges in, calling the house small, until he spots the red dragon and freezes. He moves to the dining area, acting superior. When he's served the sparkling wine, he pretends to hate it but keeps drinking. Then he tries the steak, calls it disgusting, and still can't stop eating. He demands more sauce, even snatching it from Sylvia. Kane's clearly annoyed, but Colin warns him not to make a scene. Kane smiles slyly, getting an idea. He gives Corgino a special gift, one of his glass cups. But Corgino rudely demands all of them. Kane politely declines, saying everyone will get one. Then he hints that he has a bigger surprise just for him. Corgino grins, expecting something grand, until the king walks in. The moment he sees him, Corgino's face turns pale. The king scolds him for acting like a fool in front of lower nobles and reminds him to lead by example. Corgino panics and runs away in humiliation. Silk finds the whole thing hilarious, realizing Kane totally set him up. But the king catches on too, and spends hours lecturing Kane afterward. Later, Kane visits the royal barracks, where he meets Vice Captain Gazzard again. He explains he was told to store his monster materials there, so Gazzard shows him a warehouse. But Kane says the room's too small. Gazzard jokes, thinking Kane must have something massive, like that red dragon. Kane shrugs, saying, "Nah, it's just an earth dragon." Gazzard's jaw drops again. An earth dragon would take a full team of top-tier adventurers to defeat. They go outside and Kane opens his item box, dumping out tons of monster materials. Gazard can't believe his eyes. There are so many A-rank monster parts piled up. What Gazard doesn't know is that Kane's still hiding S-rank monsters in there too. After all, the gods basically made him too powerful for this world. Gazard looks at him suspiciously, wondering if Kane's a hero or a literal disciple of the gods. But Kane just laughs it off, saying he's just an ordinary boy. Gazard wisely decides not to ask any more questions. As Kane was preparing to leave, Gazard called out to him, asking if he could stay and help train the knights. Kane didn't mind lending a hand, so Gazard excitedly said he wanted to introduce him to the knights and show off the boy who had single-handedly wiped out 30 orcs and saved a princess. Kane awkwardly agreed, wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. When they reached the training grounds, Gazard proudly introduced Kane to the knights as the hero of the recent monster raid. Kane glanced around, expecting to meet the captain, but the man was nowhere in sight. Gazard assured him the captain would show up once the mock battles began. Kane imagined some terrifying monster of a man was about to appear, but Gazard told him not to overthink it. The knights gathered for a friendly duel, and one of them hesitated, feeling bad that they were about to spar against a child. To keep things fair, he even offered Kane the first strike. Kane smiled, activated his boost spell, and in a flash closed the distance, disarming the knight before anyone could even blink. The poor guy immediately raised his hands in surrender. Kane scratched his head, realizing he may have gone a little overboard. Before he could apologize, Gazard excitedly grabbed his shoulder, shouting that Kane should take on all the knights at once. But just as the fight was about to begin, a loud voice cut through the field. "What do you think you're doing to that child?" Everyone turned as the captain, Tifana, landed dramatically in front of Kane. She immediately knelt, hugging him protectively and scolding her men for picking on a lost kid. Kane froze like a deer in headlights as Gazard quickly explained that this kid was the hero who defeated 30 orcs. Tifana's eyes widened. In an instant, her entire expression changed, from concern to pure excitement. Without hesitation, she challenged Kane to a duel. Gazard tried to tell her to at least introduce herself first, but she smirked and said, "We'll get to know each other through our blades." The knights began whispering that not even Kane could stand up to her. After all, she held the title of Master Swordsman. Kane nervously admitted that he only had a wooden practice sword, but Tifana didn't seem to care. She charged forward using her boost skill, her movements fast and precise. Their blades clashed, sparks flying across the training field as the knights watched in disbelief. Despite her speed and strength, Kane kept up perfectly, countering every strike. Then, with one quick burst of magic, he increased his speed even further, catching Tifana off guard and landing the winning blow. Silence filled the arena. Then, to everyone's shock, Tifana smiled softly, her face turning bright red. "I've decided," she said dramatically. "I'm going to marry you." Kane's jaw dropped. "Wait, what?" he shouted, panicking. "I'm only 10, and I don't even know you." She giggled, finally introducing herself as the captain of the Royal Knights and the daughter of a powerful duke from the northern forest. She added that since she was an elf, she'd stay young and beautiful for hundreds of years, so age wasn't a big deal. Kane just thought that wasn't exactly the issue here. Trying to escape, he hid behind Gazard, insisting that marriage was a huge decision and couldn't be made on the spot, especially since he was already engaged to Telestia and Silk. "Help me out here," he whispered, but Gazard pretended to fall asleep on the spot. But before he could object, she dragged him straight to the castle. When they arrived, the king looked completely confused. "Why have you brought Kane here?" he asked. Tifana stepped forward proudly and announced that she wanted to marry him. Kane awkwardly explained that he beat her in a duel and, well, that's apparently how they got here. The king blinked twice, sighed, and asked if she knew Kane was already engaged. Tifana's ears twitched in surprise, but instead of backing off, she said, "That only makes me want him more." The king chuckled nervously, explaining that the elves used to live apart from humans and were even enslaved long ago because of their beauty, but peace was established after their first king formed an alliance. He then revealed that Tifana wasn't just any elf. She was the princess of the elven nation, protected under the kingdom's rule. Hearing this, Kane nearly fainted. The king advised her to at least write to her father for permission before rushing into marriage. Tifana agreed but dragged Kane along to discuss things privately. For her, discussing things apparently meant more sword fights disguised as dates. The next few days became a blur of duels, exhaustion, and Tifana chasing Kane around the courtyard. Later, Gazard caught up with Kane and noticed how drained he looked. Kane complained that Tifana had been forcing him into endless training dates, though he admitted she'd gotten a lot stronger. He also revealed that he had now gained the Master Swordsman title himself. Just as he finished speaking, Tefana's voice echoed again, and Cain immediately tried to run. But Gazard grabbed him, saying the king wanted to see him. When they entered the throne room, the king showed Cain an ancient book, explaining that it contained emperor-level magic passed down through generations. But no one had ever been able to read it, because it was written in Japanese. Cain froze, realizing the truth. The kingdom's first king must have been a fellow reincarnator. The king looked at him suspiciously and asked who he really was. Cain knew he couldn't hide it anymore. So, he revealed everything, how he was reincarnated into this world with memories from his past life. His father, Garm, looked shocked and asked if he was truly his son. Cain nodded, saying the gods themselves confirmed it. The entire room fell silent. The king asked him to open his status window, and when he did, everyone was left speechless. His blessings were at level 10 across the board, and his title read, God's Chosen. The king muttered that if word of this got out, the entire world would kneel before him. But Cain quickly refused that idea, saying he didn't want fame or worship. He just wanted to live normally and keep adventuring with the people he cared about. The king smiled, respecting his wish, and agreed to keep everything secret. Just then, the door burst open. Tefana was back, holding a letter from her father granting full permission for the marriage. Before anyone could react, she grabbed Cain by the hand and dragged him out of the throne room yet again. The king and his advisors exchanged helpless looks, deciding it was best to keep Cain's divine identity hidden, hoping that he will continue to protect the country and its people. Not long after Cain's duel with Tefana, news of their sudden engagement spread fast, and when Telestia and Silk found out, they were not happy. Both girls confronted him, crossing their arms in unison, demanding an explanation. Cain awkwardly scratched his head, trying to calm them down, but their glare could have melted armor. Eventually, though, they sighed and accepted it. After all, Cain had a talent for attracting chaos. Still, they warned him not to go accepting any more marriage proposals, worried about how many people they'd end up sharing him with. Just then, the door burst open, and Tefana strolled in with her usual energy, declaring she came to share her love with her future husband. Telestia and Silk exchanged the most judgmental stares Cain had ever seen, instantly suspecting him of doing something indecent. Before he could defend himself, Tefana grabbed him by the arm and dragged him out of the room, ignoring his desperate protests. Later that evening, Cain revisited the First King's ancient book. As he flipped through the pages, he discovered a hidden message written in strange characters. It said that if he could read this text, it meant he too was from another world, and that what followed was the First King's personal record. The book revealed the king's true name, Yuya von Esfort, a man who, like Cain, died in an accident but was summoned into this world with his original body. Before Cain could dive deeper, Telestia and Silk appeared again, curious about what he was studying. They assumed he was preparing for the academy entrance exams and offered to study with him. Cain panicked, quickly saying he was too busy today, then made the mistake of claiming tomorrow would be even worse. The girls looked suspicious, and before they could corner him, he bolted straight out of the room. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The moment he turned a corner, he ran right into Tefana, again. She cheerfully asked if he wanted to spar with her the next day, but Cain, half out of breath, politely declined and ran off in the opposite direction. The following morning marked his 12th birthday, a big day because he was finally old enough to become a registered adventurer. Excited, Cain went straight to the capital's Adventurers Guild. The place was bustling with activity, veteran adventurers swapping stories, quest boards packed with missions, and the air heavy with ale and ambition. As Cain looked around, a red-haired adventurer brushed past him and casually warned, "Stay sharp, kid. You only get one life." Something about that man felt familiar. Shrugging it off, Cain walked up to the counter, where a friendly clerk introduced herself as Tia. She handed him a form to fill out. Cain hesitated for a moment. Should he mention that he was a noble? Then he decided to leave it blank. He didn't want special treatment. After finishing the form, Tia handed him a small crystal and told him to drop a bit of his blood on it. The crystal glowed and she smiled, saying, "Congratulations, you're now a G-rank adventurer." Cain grinned proudly, thinking of his tutors who were only D-rank themselves. Before he could even enjoy the moment, a few rowdy adventurers interrupted. "Hey lady, stop wasting your time on some brat," one of them said, sneering at Cain. "Go home to your mommy, kid." The man swung his foot to trip him, but Cain sidestepped easily. Another tried to punch him, but Cain slipped right past again, making them look like complete fools. When one of them drew his sword in frustration, a familiar voice stopped him cold. It was the same red-haired man from earlier, Claude, a member of the elite Ice Flame party. "Want to try that again?" Claude said, cracking his knuckles. The bullies froze, recognized him, and immediately bolted. Cain thanked him for stepping in, and Claude, impressed by the kid's reflexes, invited him for a drink. Cain agreed, but one sip of ale later, he realized he wasn't exactly built for adult drinks. Claude laughed it off and asked how Cain got so strong at such a young age. Cain explained that he'd been trained by powerful tutors since childhood. Curious, Cain asked about Claude's party name. Claude proudly said Ice Flame came from the combination of his fire swordsmanship and his wife's ice magic. He even pulled out his golden adventurer card, showing off his A rank. Cain's eyes widened in admiration. Claude chuckled and said even A rank wasn't the limit. The legendary First King once held a triple S rank with a black guild card. Right then, Claude's wife Lena appeared out of nowhere, smacking him on the head for sneaking off to drink. Claude laughed nervously while introducing her, and Cain politely thanked her for letting him borrow her husband. She smiled sweetly and said, "If you ever get into trouble, call for me," before dragging Claude off by the ear. After they left, Cain checked the quest board, scanning through dozens of requests. He considered taking an easy cargo delivery quest since it would be simple with his item box, but decided it'd be more fun to fight monsters. Then he spotted a quest for goblin extermination, with no limit on how many he could take down. Perfect, he thought. Just as he was about to leave, he bumped into Tifana and Dessard, who were preparing to train with the knights. Curious, Tifana asked what he was up to. When Cain mentioned he was heading out on his first quest, her eyes lit up. "Then I'll come with you. I can't miss my husband's first adventure." Before he could protest, she left Dessard in charge of the knights and dragged him off again. The two entered the nearby forest, where Tifana gleefully skipped ahead, asking where the goblins were hiding. Using his detection magic, Cain sensed a group of them nearby, and also spotted a man surrounded by monsters. Without hesitation, the pair rushed in. Cain quickly healed the wounded man while Tifana charged into the goblin horde, cutting them down effortlessly. More goblins appeared from the shadows, but Cain boosted her with a spell, synchronizing their movements perfectly. Together, they fought like a single force of nature. Just as things calmed down, a massive goblin emerged, a towering brute easily twice the size of the others. Cain reinforced Tifana again, and she sliced the creature clean in half with one powerful strike. Grinning proudly, she looked back at him and teased, "So? Do I get a kiss for that?" Before Cain could respond, she suddenly froze mid-flirt as a new threat appeared, giant green lizards crawling from the trees. Cain quickly told her to back off and protect the injured man. Then, raising his hand, he unleashed a blinding flash of light, stunning the beasts, followed by a wave of enormous ice pillars that pierced the forest floor. And within seconds, the battle was over. Tifana just smiled, whispering, "That's my husband," while the rescued man could only stare in disbelief. Later, Cain's tutors arrived to investigate the commotion, finding nothing left but a smoking crater. Meanwhile, Cain returned to the guild and asked Tia if he could turn in the green lizards he defeated, even though he hadn't officially taken the quest. Her jaw dropped. "Wait, you killed green lizards? Those are C-rank monsters." When Cain casually mentioned he'd taken down 30 of them, she nearly fainted before running off to find the branch chief. A few minutes later, Cain was brought before Cedric, the deputy guild master. Cedric was skeptical, assuming Cain was just a kid trying to cheat for easy money. "No way you beat those things," he scoffed, accusing Cain of lying. When Cain stood firm, Cedric snapped, saying he didn't tolerate cheaters and ordered his guild card revoked. Before things could escalate, the guild master himself walked in. Cedric explained the situation, but the guild master simply laughed. "You still have a lot to learn," he told Cedric. Then he called for a guest, Tifana. She burst in, immediately hugging Cain and calling him husband in front of everyone. The entire guild went silent. Tia and Cedric stared in shock while Cain muttered, "Not here, please." The guild master revealed that Cain was actually a baron and the same hero who'd saved the princess. Cedric turned pale, realizing what he'd done. He bowed repeatedly, begging forgiveness. Tifana coldly suggested execution for insulting a noble, but Cain quickly waved it off, saying he'd let it slide this time. The guild master then decided that Cain's accomplishment deserved recognition. Tifana bragged that Cain had even slain a red dragon when he was just 10 years old, so the guild master decided to skip several ranks and promote him straight to A rank. Tia and Cedric were speechless. This kid had just joined the guild and he was already near the top. The guild master apologizes for Cedric's behavior, but Cain just laughs it off, telling him it's no big deal. The master admits that when he first heard his little sister got engaged, he was worried, but after meeting Cain, he's actually relieved. He smiles and tells Cain to please take good care of her. Meanwhile, far above, the gods are watching the chaos Cain keeps causing. Some of them start to wonder if maybe giving him that much power was a mistake. But Xenon disagrees, saying Cain needs to get even stronger. He reveals that a terrifying being named Aaron, sealed away 300 years ago, is close to being released, and when that happens, Cain will need strength beyond what he already has. The gods decide it's time for him to train under a master who can push him to the next level. Back at the palace, Cain's peaceful moment doesn't last long. The girls show up, asking if they can study together again, but before Cain can even answer, Tefana bursts in. She cheerfully says she had so much fun on their forest date, and suggests they go to the beach next time. The other girls freeze, realizing Cain turned them down the other day only to go out with her. Annoyed, they tell him that he owes them dates too, while Cain just nervously apologizes, caught in a situation no magic spell can fix. Later that night, Cain is lying in bed when Sylvia suddenly barges in, panicking because she forgot to wake him up. Today is the day of his academy entrance exams. Cain jumps out of bed and runs out as Sylvia keeps apologizing behind him. He tells her not to worry, he's got this, then teleports straight to the academy with a flash of light. At the gate, he checks in and is given his exam room. As he walks through the halls, he realizes he doesn't recognize a single name on the list. Maybe Talesia and Silk are in a different room? Shrugging it off, he takes his seat. The examiner enters, explaining that they'll have 2 hours for the written test, and that anyone caught cheating will be immediately expelled. The test begins. It's mostly simple math and language questions, which Cain breezes through thanks to his knowledge from his previous life. Barely 30 minutes pass before he stretches and declares he's finished. The examiner looks stunned. No one finishes this early, but Cain just smiles and sets his paper down. After the written exam, everyone is led outside for the magic assessment, which gets Cain excited. The examiner explains they must cast their strongest spell at a target. Cain hesitates, wondering if it's really okay to use his full power, but the examiner assures him the field is covered by a powerful barrier. He can use anything he wants. One by one, the students go. The first boy nervously chants and throws a tiny fireball, so weak it barely singes the air. Cain blinks in disbelief. The next student's spell isn't much better. He realizes this must be the average ability for 12-year-olds here. He had planned to show off his Inferno spell, but maybe that's overkill. When his turn comes, Cain gathers mana and forms a small blue fireball. He uses a simple fire bullet spell, except it detonates into a massive explosion that rips through the training field's wall, shaking the ground. Everyone freezes. Cain looks around, stunned. Wait, that was just beginner magic? He mutters. The examiner stares wide-eyed, unable to process what she's seeing. She sighs and, deciding to move on quickly, announces the next test, the swordsmanship exam. They're brought to another part of the academy, where the examiner introduces several A-ranked adventurers who'll be helping with evaluations. To Cain's surprise, one of them is Claude, the adventurer he met at the guild. Claude spots him and grins. "Oh, it's you? How about I be your opponent?" Cain tries to politely refuse, but the examiner insists. Claude is the highest-ranking fighter here, so he has no choice. The two face off. Claude tells him to come at him with everything he's got. Cain activates his boost skill and charges forward, blades clashing in a blur. The other students gasp. They can barely see what's happening. Claude laughs mid-fight, impressed that Cain's keeping up. "You're stronger than half the examiners here," he says, pushing harder. Cain, trying not to go overboard, tells him to relax. It's just an exam, but Claude's too hyped. He boosts himself and suddenly the two are fighting at incredible speed. Finally, the examiner yells for them to stop, saying they're terrifying the other kids. Claude laughs and admits they might have gotten carried away. He pats Cain on the shoulder, saying they should go on a quest together sometime. Cain, looking overwhelmed, just nervously agrees. The examiner says he's seen enough. Cain can go home and wait for his results. When he returns home, Sylvia rushes to him, eager to know how he did. He says everything went smoothly. Sylvia grins, saying they should celebrate, but Cain insists it's too early. Then his stomach growls, so she laughs and runs off to make him food anyway. Later at the palace, Cain is summoned by the king, who's not exactly thrilled about hearing that part of the academy got blown up during the exam. Cain explains that the examiner told him to go all out since there was a magic barrier. He adds that he didn't even use his emperor-level magic, just basic fire magic, and it still caused massive damage. The king nearly chokes hearing that Cain can use emperor-level spells already. He asks if Cain could test those somewhere else, but everyone immediately shouts no way. The king then asks about his exam room, since Telesia complained she didn't see him there. Cain explains he went through the south entrance and was sent to his assigned room. The king frowns, asking why the academy even has a south entrance. That's when Cain realizes his mistake. The north entrance is for nobles. He accidentally took the exam with all the commoners. The duke sighs, remembering the commotion this caused with the headmaster. In a flashback, the headmaster panics, explaining that a commoner scored a perfect written exam, destroyed the training field, and fought on par with an A-rank adventurer. The duke just laughs, instantly realizing it could only be Cain, and tells him to release the results. Back at the academy, the results go public. Cain scans the list until Silk calls out, he's ranked number 1. Telesia takes second and she's third. Silk teases him about all the destruction he caused, while Telesia crosses her arms, pouting that she didn't even see him during the exam. Cain starts sweating, worried she's angry. Then his sister Rain appears, guiding new students. The moment she spots him, she runs over, hugging him proudly. She congratulates him for taking the top spot and tells him that as the highest scorer, it's his job to give the opening speech at the entrance ceremony. After passing the exam, Cain wishes Telesia could handle the entrance speech instead, but his sister Rain reminds him he doesn't really have a choice. Top scorer means top responsibility. When he returns home, Sylvia bursts into celebration the moment she hears the news. She's so overjoyed that she declares she'll cook enough food for 100 people. Cain can't help but laugh, thinking she's going a bit overboard, but deep down he admits, it's a moment worth celebrating. The day of the entrance ceremony finally arrives. Cain stands proudly in his new academy uniform, spotting his parents in the crowd. Beside him are Telesia and Silk, who immediately start teasing him, saying he looks way too adorable in uniform. Around them, other students whisper and stare, wondering who the kid sitting between two of the prettiest girls in the academy is, and why he looks so confident about it. When the headmaster calls Cain's name to deliver his speech, the entire room falls quiet. Cain walks up, introduces himself politely, and even admits he accidentally took the wrong exam, but says he's looking forward to making new friends and learning together with everyone. His honest and cheerful attitude wins the crowd instantly, and the students erupt into cheers. Then the king himself takes the stage, congratulating all new students and making a few comments about irregular students. Cain can feel the king's gaze aimed directly at him, and he nervously laughs to himself, realizing that warning was definitely meant for him. Classes begin and their homeroom teacher, Alka, introduces herself. She explains that everyone should start thinking about their future paths, what kind of studies they'll focus on. Cain says he wants to become an adventurer, but Telesia immediately objects, reminding him that he's already a baron and should study noble responsibilities instead. Cain frowns, but Silk quickly steps in, saying he can pick multiple tracks. With that, Cain decides to study nobility, adventuring, and magic all at once. When he asks what the girls are choosing, Telesia says she'll take nobility and internal affairs, explaining that she wants to help manage his domain someday. Silk follows up, choosing nobility and commerce, saying she also wants to support him in the future. Cain blushes, realizing both girls are basically saying they want to work alongside him for life. As they walk out, Cain spots a group of older students cornering a young girl. The girl looks terrified, and then Cain recognizes her. It's Parma, the beast girl who runs the item shop. The bullies, led by Habit, mock her for being a beast, claiming she doesn't belong in a noble's class. Cain steps forward without hesitation, saying the academy treats nobles and commoners as equals. Habit scoffs, but one of his friends, Sin, recognizes Cain and immediately panics, remembering their previous encounter. The bullies can't understand why a noble would defend a commoner, but Cain stands firm, saying he's just standing up for a friend. Habit sneers and threatens to ruin Parma's family, but before things can get worse, Telesia and Silk arrive. The moment the bullies see them, their confidence vanishes. They drop to their knees, apologizing repeatedly. Cain makes them apologize to Parma before they run off in shame. Parma thanks Cain with a shy smile, but before he can say anything, the girls immediately start questioning him about his relationship with her. Cain freezes as they surround him. He's sure they're forming some sort of alliance to interrogate him, and he starts sweating bullets. Right then, Cain suddenly hears a strange voice whispering inside his mind, telling him to visit the library. Curious and uneasy, he slips away from the girls and heads toward it. But the moment he opens the library door, everything changes. A flash of light engulfs him, and in the blink of an eye, he's standing in a completely different space. Inside, an older man sits casually at a table, sipping coffee. "Would you like a cup?" the man asks. Cain, confused, demands to know who he is and how there's coffee in this world. The man simply smiles and says, "I've been waiting for you, Kazuya." Hearing his name from his previous life shocks Cain to his core. The man introduces himself as Yuya, and Cain's eyes widen. He recognizes that name. Yuya was the first king from the old history books, but those books were written more than 300 years ago. Cain wonders if he's a ghost, but Yuya just chuckles and tells him to check his own status. When Cain opens his status window, his jaw drops. His title now includes God of Creation. Yuya explains that in another world he created, he's considered a god, which is why he's still alive after all this time. He also mentions that he recently spoke with Xenon and the other gods. They all agreed to have him train Cain personally. Cain insists he's already strong enough, but Yuya smirks and tosses him a cookie. Cain lunges to grab it, yet Yuya effortlessly blocks him, saying, "You've got a long way to go." He then explains that Cain must prepare to face Eren, the evil god who will soon awaken. Yuya tells the story. 300 years ago, Eren used his divine power to corrupt the minds of humanity, turning people against one another by whispering distrust into their hearts. The world nearly destroyed itself in endless war until Yuya and his allies managed to seal Eren away. But now that seal is weakening, and Eren's return is inevitable. Cain asks why the gods can't just reseal him again, but Yuya explains that since they've ascended as gods, they can no longer directly interfere in the mortal world. That's why Cain was chosen, to be their sword. Before Cain can ask more, the scenery shifts again. Suddenly, he's standing in the middle of the ocean, wind roaring around him. Yuya tossing him a sword. "If you can complete this training," Yuya says, "I'll tell you everything else." He hands Cain a glowing compass, explaining that it will guide him back once his training is complete. Yuya tells him to raise his level to at least 600 if he wants any chance of defeating Eren. Cain groans. He's only around level 300. He worries he'll miss school, but Yuya laughs and says, "Don't worry. Time moves differently here. 1 year in this world is only 1 day in yours." With that, Yuya wishes him luck and vanishes. Left alone, Cain sighs and starts walking into the dense forest. Almost immediately, monstrous beasts attack from every direction. He draws his blade and begins the most grueling battle of his life. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Telestia and Silk visit Cain's mansion after he fails to show up for class. Sylvia's pacing nervously, convinced something's wrong. Telestia, however, believes in him and decides to stay overnight until he returns. In the other world, Cain fights endlessly, covered in sweat and dirt. Months pass and he's barely hanging on. One day, while collapsing from exhaustion, he hears a faint cry nearby. Forcing himself up, he follows the sound and finds a wounded beast lying helplessly on the ground. At first, he thinks about ending its suffering, but then remembers his promise to protect others. Gathering the last of his strength, he pours all his remaining magic into healing the creature. The spell drains him completely and he collapses. When he wakes up, the beast is beside him, alive and wagging its tail. It licks his face affectionately, and Cain smiles weakly, realizing it had guarded him while he was unconscious. He names it Haku, and from that day forward, the two become inseparable. Together, Cain and Haku survive the endless forest, helping each other through every trial. And finally, after what feels like years, Cain reaches the house again. Yuya greets him with a calm smile. "Welcome back," he says. "Looks like you've grown stronger." Yuya looks at Cain with a warm smile, commenting on how much he's grown. It's hard to believe, but 4 whole years have passed since Cain began his training. Yuya's eyes then shift toward Haku, who now looks majestic and powerful. He chuckles and says, "That's no ordinary creature, that's a holy beast." He suggests Cain form a contract with it. Cain agrees, and the moment he does, Haku vanishes into light. Yuya explains that it means the contract is complete. Cain can now summon Haku anytime he wants. But before he can relax, Yuya says there's still more to do. He introduces Cain to his next teacher, Duran, a grizzled warrior radiating sheer power. Duran sizes Cain up and shakes his head. "You're still not strong enough," he says bluntly. "Eren, the evil god you'll face, is stronger than even Yuya, and Yuya's stronger than me. So if you can't beat me, you've got no chance against him." Cain activates his boost skill, launching forward with full speed, but Duran casually dodges and floors him with a single punch. The next thing Cain knows, he's waking up in a small, cozy cabin. Duran's wife, Rue, smiles kindly at him. Cain learns that they also live with a dragon named Jean, who immediately catches his attention. Excited, Cain rushes over to meet the dragon, wanting to be friends, but before he can, Haku pops out and jumps in front of him, growling protectively. Apparently, Haku doesn't like Jean very much. Later, they all sit together for dinner. Cain takes a single bite of Rue's home-cooked food, and tears start running down his face. It's been 4 years since he's eaten a real meal, and the warmth of it hits him harder than any punch Duran ever threw. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Telestra and Silk have taken up baking lessons. Every day, they work hard in the kitchen, covered in flour, smiling as they imagine the day Cain comes home. They want to welcome him back with the best sweets he's ever had. Back in training, Cain spends every day sparring with Duran and getting absolutely destroyed. Day after day, he's knocked flat, his body aching, but he refuses to quit. A full year passes like this, and Duran starts to worry. If this is the limit of your strength, he says, how do you plan to defeat Eren? Cain clenches his fists, thinking back to what Yuya told him. Eren wasn't always the god of chaos. He used to be the god of amusement. There were once 8 gods in total. But one day, Eren lost his mind and began treating the world like his own twisted game. Using divine oracles, he forced humanity into a massive death game, turning everyone against each other. If he returns, Yuya warned that nightmare will begin again, and everyone Cain loves will be dragged into it. That thought alone pushes Cain to keep training harder than ever. Yuya later reveals an even deeper truth: the connection between Eren and Cain's past life. Eren was the very one responsible for the death of Cain's parents in his old world. They weren't just random victims, they were chosen by the gods themselves. Cain's parents, Sei and Megumi, had died in the car accident. They were summoned as heroes. The gods couldn't intervene directly against Eren, so they gave the 3 of them a sacred orb capable of sealing him away. Yuya tells him what happened next. In a fierce battle, Megumi unleashed her magic, but it had no effect on Eren. Sei and Yuya then charged in with their swords, managing to slice off Eren's arm, but his counterattack was devastating. Megumi was struck down instantly, and Sei, fueled by rage, activated his ultimate skill and lunged at Eren, only to be impaled. In that split second, Yuya used the opening Sei created and sealed Eren away, but it cost Sei his life. Hearing this story, Cain falls silent. The truth crashes down on him like a storm, and tears fill his eyes. Remembering the faces of his parents, he vows to never let anyone else suffer that same fate. Fueled by that determination, Cain pushes himself beyond his limits. He faces Duran again, and this time he wins. His power erupts like a storm, overwhelming Duran completely. The warrior laughs proudly, admitting that Cain has finally surpassed him. Cain's training is complete. Together with Yuya and Duran, he visits the graves of his parents. Yuya smiles softly, saying that Sei and Megumi were always worried about him, but would be proud to see how far he's come. Cain thanks Yuya for taking care of them and for everything he's done. Yuya grins and pulls out a familiar cookie. "Think you can take it this time?" he teases. Cain snatches it instantly, and Yuya bursts into laughter, acknowledging his incredible growth. Yuya smiles proudly, acknowledging how much Cain has grown since they first met. He jokes about having coffee together, but Cain can't hide his eagerness to return to his own world. Yuya laughs, pointing out how different Cain looks now, older, sharper, more mature. With a flick of his power, Yuya helps Cain revert his appearance back to normal. Before Cain departs, Yuya reminds him to look after Haku, and Duran tells him to let Jean, their dragon companion, experience the other world too. Cain agrees, forming a contract with Jean as well. Filled with gratitude, he thanks both Yuya and Duran for everything they've done. As Cain prepares to teleport home, Yuya tosses him a sword, telling him to deliver it to the king. In the blink of an eye, Cain vanishes and reappears at his mansion. The moment the girls see him, they burst into tears of joy. Overwhelmed, he apologizes for making them worry, but Telestra assures him they never lost faith in his return. She proudly reveals that she and the others even learned to bake cookies just for him. They welcome him back warmly, and Cain, touched by their love, happily digs into the cookies. Soon after, Cain meets with the king to report everything that happened. He explains how he encountered Yuya in another world, but the king finds the story unbelievable, at least until Cain presents the sword Yuya gave him. The king recognizes it instantly, confirming Cain's words are true. Then, the king opens a letter from Milia and learns Cain was actually trained by Yuya himself. Shocked, he listens as Cain recalls the brutal years of his training, how he was left alone in a forest filled with deadly monsters and spent every single day getting beaten down, only to stand back up stronger. The king is stunned, wondering how anyone could survive 5 years of that. The Duke, though, just chuckles, saying Cain has always been full of surprises. The Duke then mentions that during Cain's long absence, the Adventurers Guild had been searching for him. Since he hadn't accepted any quest since becoming an A-rank adventurer, his registration was about to be cancelled. Alarmed, Cain rushes to the guild to fix the situation. When he arrives, he meets the guild master, who explains that after Cain's promotion to A-rank, he was assigned to eliminate a group of bandits, but the quest was never completed. There's a time limit, and if he misses it, he loses his status. Without hesitation, Cain accepts the mission. The master describes the target, a group of around 10 bandits ambushing travelers on the road to the capital. Confident, he assures Cain that someone of his strength won't have any trouble. Cain teleports straight to the road and casts Fly, soaring high to scout from above. Soon, he spots a group of bandits attacking a passing carriage. But as he swoops closer, his eyes widen. The carriage is being escorted by none other than his former tutors, Nina and Millie, and their client happens to be Parma's father. Seeing Millie wounded, Cain dives down immediately, using his magic to heal her injuries in an instant. The bandits laugh, mocking him for being just a kid, unaware of who they're dealing with. Cain's expression darkens. He's not about to forgive anyone who dares hurt his teacher. As the bandits rush in, Cain barely even moves. With effortless precision, he knocks each one out, sending one man flying with a casual swing. In moments, the fight is over. Cain sighs, remarking how tough it is to hold back his power. The girls can only stare, completely stunned by his strength. After the battle, Millie asks why he suddenly appeared, and Cain explains he was just completing a subjugation quest. The girls are shocked. Such missions are meant for high-ranked adventurers, not beginners. Cain casually reveals he's already A-rank, skipping all the ranks in between. They're speechless. With the bandits captured and caged, they return to town, heading to Tamani's item shop to drop off Parma's father. Parma runs out, overjoyed to see her dad safe, and lights up even more when she spots Cain. Noticing the captured bandits, she laughs, saying even on his day off from school, he's still working hard. Millie is surprised to hear that Cain's now a baron, wondering if she should address him more formally. But Cain smiles and tells them he'll always see them as his mentors. They can just call him by his name like always. Millie nods, touched by his humility, and remarks that he's matured so much, almost like a grown man. Cain excuses himself, saying he needs to report back to the guild, and runs off, but the girls chase after him anyway. When he arrives to turn in the quest, Tia at the counter is shocked that he's already finished it so quickly. She's about to notify the guild master when a group of rude adventurers start harassing the other girl nearby. The girls try to ignore them, but one thug grabs Millie's arm, only for Cain to step in, his aura flaring. The men instantly recognize him from a past encounter, and their bravado turns to panic. They stumble back, terrified. Just then, Claude appears, curious about the noise. Cain greets him warmly, happy to see him again. Claude is surprised to see him with Millie, revealing she is actually his younger sister. The coincidence leaves everyone laughing, and they all sit down together for drinks. Claude asks how they ended up together, and Millie proudly explains how Cain saved them from the bandits and that he's already an A-rank adventurer. Claude nearly spits out his drink in disbelief. It's only been a few days since Cain registered. But then he remembers their mock fight and nods, saying it actually makes sense now. Millie wonders aloud how Cain got so ridiculously strong, and Cain immediately panics inside. He can't exactly tell them he was trained by gods. Luckily, Millie recalls how he once took down a red dragon as a child, and assumes he's just always been this powerful. Claude, impressed, pointing out that red dragons are SS-ranked monsters, the kind only legends can defeat. The girls proudly show off the magic bags Cain made for them, proof that his talents go far beyond just raw power. Lena curiously asks how much the magic bags can actually hold. Millie admits she's never managed to fill hers up, but recalls Cain telling them that it could easily fit an entire mansion inside. Hearing that, Lena's jaw drops. She realizes these aren't ordinary bags, they're practically national treasures. She instantly gets jealous and starts pestering Cain to make one for her too. Cain laughs awkwardly but eventually agrees to craft one for her. Overjoyed, Lena thanks him, and then promptly falls asleep on the table. Claude chuckles, explaining that she really can't handle her alcohol at all. Suddenly, Cain remembers something important. He's missed an entire week of classes at the academy. He panics, realizing he needs to stop skipping before he falls behind. Claude, amused, asks why someone like him, already a baron, even bothers going to school. But Cain insists there's still a lot he doesn't know and wants to keep learning. Nina smiles warmly, calling him a good kid, and even goes in for a hug, but Cain quickly bolts away, flustered. Just then, Tia shows up with some news. She explains that the adventurer who was supposed to teach at the academy got injured, and Claude suddenly perks up, volunteering to fill in for them. The next day at the academy, Cain attends his magic class. Students are practicing spells at the targets, and Cain gets excited to finally try out the new magic he learned from Yuya. But before he can cast anything, the teacher stops him, warning that he's forbidden from using attack magic after what happened last time, when even his beginner-level spell ended up breaking the academy's entire barrier. Cain sighs in frustration while his classmates whisper about how he doesn't really fit in with the rest of them. Later, during adventuring class, the teacher introduces Claude and the others as temporary instructors to replace the injured teacher. The students immediately recognize Claude and Lena. They're practically celebrities. Claude starts by telling everyone to show their guild cards, and we see that all the students are still bronze rank. He then suggests Cain show off his gold ranked card, but Cain quickly fakes a nervous laugh and claims he forgot it, not wanting to stand out even more. The class then moves outdoors for combat training. Claude begins sparring with the students one by one, easily defeating each of them to show the gap in skill. Cain waits excitedly, itching for his turn to finally show what he can do, but Claude keeps picking others first. Cain ends up feeling ignored and left out, though this is actually part of Claude's plan. He wants the students to witness his strength first, so when Cain fights him later and keeps up, everyone will truly appreciate Cain's ability. Eventually, it's down to Cain's turn, but just as he's about to step forward, the bell rings. Class is over. Cain deflates in disappointment while Claude scratches his head, apologizing for losing track of time. He promises to duel Cain next time, but the teacher quickly shuts that idea down, saying the academy can't afford to hire Claude again. They already spent their repair budget fixing the wall and barrier Cain accidentally destroyed before. As the students thank the instructors for the training, Cain quietly sulks, still annoyed that he didn't get to fight. That night, frustration boils over. Cain storms into the forest, thinking about everything, and unleashes his anger on anything in sight. He comes across a dragon and takes it down effortlessly with a single slash, then fires off an enormous blast that ignites the whole forest. The explosion lights up the sky, and guards immediately panic, thinking they're under attack by the Prince of Darkness. The alarms blare and we see Garm rushing out to investigate. By the time Cain cools off, he realizes what he's done and teleports home. Unfortunately, he leaves behind his handkerchief. When his father arrives at the scene, he finds nothing but a massive crater and Cain's handkerchief lying in the middle. His face goes pale. The next morning, Cain is summoned to the royal palace. The king and his ministers tell him about the strange explosion his father reported. They fear it might be the work of the Prince of Darkness and even consider contacting other nations to prepare for war. Cain gulps and confesses it was him. The king scolds him for his recklessness, and when Cain gets home, his father continues the lecture, giving him another earful for causing such chaos. Meanwhile, in a distant cave, a fragment of Aaron begins to stir. A goblin picks it up, but before it can react, a dragon swoops in and swallows the goblin whole. Inside the beast, Aaron's power awakens. He possesses the dragon's body, realizing that the seal on him has weakened. Regaining some of his strength, he swears to take revenge on the other gods. Back at the academy, Cain's class is learning about summoning magic. The teacher calls him out, and Cain assumes she's about to make him study alone again. But this time, she tells him that since they aren't practicing attack magic, he can join in. Cain gets excited, and the teacher introduces their instructor, Grat, a mage from the royal palace. Grat explains there are two kinds of summoning magic. The first is forming a contract by bonding directly with a monster, and the second is summoning one through a magic circle. Today they'll be trying the magic circle method. Grat hands out talismans to everyone, and the students begin summoning different creatures, each trying to form a contract. One student manages to summon a huge beast, but it refuses to submit and vanishes. Grat tells him he didn't have enough magic power to control it, but still praises him for summoning such a powerful monster. Once everyone's done, Grat turns to Cain and says it's his turn. Cain hesitates, worried he might summon something crazy again like he did when he was little. But Grat reassures him, saying if he can't form a contract, the monster will simply disappear. Encouraged, Cain channels his magic into the circle. But Grat starts to panic as the circle flares with overwhelming energy, even blowing Cain back. A demon suddenly appears, wondering how a human managed to summon him. It introduces itself as the Prince of Darkness. Cain freezes in shock and quickly casts a flash spell, blinding everyone else in the room. He wonders if the demon is connected to Aaron, but the demon scoffs, unimpressed that a mere human dares face him. Using his ability, the demon checks Cain's status, and instantly submits, realizing just how powerful Cain truly is. To Cain's surprise, the demon offers to serve him, saying he'd even destroy an entire nation if ordered. Cain quickly refuses, saying he'd never ask for something like that. The demon introduces himself as Seth, the Prince of Darkness, and tells Cain he can summon him anytime. Then he disappears. Grat, now trembling, asks what just happened, but Cain claims he couldn't form a contract and that the creature vanished. Grat believes him, though he later reports everything to the king. Cain is summoned and questioned, and he's forced to admit that he really did summon the Prince of Darkness. The king and everyone else freak out, knowing such a being could wipe out the capital in seconds. Cain apologizes, saying all he did was pour his magic into the circle. Grat wonders how much power Cain must have to summon someone like that, while the king guesses it might be because of his training under the first king. The king asks to see his status but warns Grat not to speak a word of what he sees. When Cain opens his status window, everyone is stunned. He now has the title demigod, and his stats are immeasurable. Grat drops to his knees, calling him a god, while the dupe jokes they should start calling him master. The king realizes Cain's power is enough to wipe out the entire world, and that thought alone terrifies him. But Cain insists he has no such intentions and just wants to live normally. The king decides to promote him to Viscount, giving him control over an entire town, and also announces his engagement to the princess. Later at home, Sylvia congratulates Cain on his promotion and wonders what area he'll oversee. Cain says it's a town near the capital, and Sylvia suggests they celebrate. But Colin rushes in, reporting that his brother witnessed a sudden monster onslaught in the nearby forest. Cain heads back to Gracia to visit his family home, where his brother explains that the number of monster attacks in the forest has surged recently. Many adventurers have been ambushed, and the monsters are acting far more savage than before. He recalls a similar onslaught decades ago, where beasts suddenly went berserk and attacked cities. Based on the records, the situation now looks nearly identical, but without concrete proof they can't mobilize large forces yet. Cain volunteers to investigate, but his brother worries since he's still young. Cain reassures him, showing his gold-ranked adventurer card and reminding him of how he once defeated a red dragon. His brother finally agrees and thanks him for helping. Cain then visits the Adventurers Guild. The clerk there looks down on him for being a kid, but her jaw drops when she sees his gold card. Another clerk, Rudy, quickly apologizes on her behalf. Curious, she asks why Cain came, and he says he wants more details about the forest. Rudy explains that monster behavior has been getting worse, with growing signs of another onslaught. Just then, Millie and Nina arrive at the guild. Cain is surprised to see them, but they explain that the guild called for high-ranked adventurers. The monsters were too strong for just the two of them, so they plan to team up with Claude and Lena. Rudy asks Cain what he plans to do, and he says he'll check the forest himself. Rudy warns him it's dangerous to go alone, especially since he's a noble. If something happens, it could cause major trouble for the guild. Cain insists he can handle it, so he summons Haku and Jean to accompany him, who immediately leap toward him in excitement. But soon, Cain senses something's wrong. Using his search skill, he detects that something is watching them. As he moves through the forest, he cuts down several monsters, but that strange feeling won't go away. He then summons Seth, who appears irritated, but immediately kneels upon seeing Cain. Cain explains the situation and asks him to help investigate. Seth senses an overwhelming power nearby. Even the other monsters seem drawn to it. To dig deeper, Seth summons his servant Delmania, who is shocked to see Cain and instantly kneels. Seth introduces Cain as their new master, the god who will conquer the world, though Cain quickly tells them to stop calling him that. Seth explains that Delmania specializes in reconnaissance. Delmania activates his special skill, summoning countless small creatures that scatter across the forest to gather intel. As they move, the monsters around them grow more and more violent. Cain fights through them effortlessly, and Delmania can only watch in awe at the sheer power Cain unleashes. Cain easily defeats all the monsters and leaves the rest of the investigation to the others while he returns to the guild. His friends are shocked when they see the S-ranked monsters he brought back, and soon Claude and Lena arrive. They question where the monsters came from, and Cain explains they were from the forest. Hearing this, everyone becomes uneasy, realizing there must be even stronger monsters deeper inside. Meanwhile, Dalmatia senses something trying to intimidate them, warning the group not to get any closer, but Seth takes it as a challenge. At the same time, deep in the forest, Eren senses the approach of the two. As they arrive, an enormous horde of monsters appears before them. Eren decides it's time to begin his game and orders all the monsters to attack. Seth quickly teleports back to warn Cain. The ground begins to shake, alarms sound throughout the city, and Seth informs Cain that the onslaught has begun. Cain immediately tells Rudy to alert his brother and instructs Claude to organize the adventurers to defend the town. Despite Rudy's warnings about the danger, Cain insists on heading into the forest, saying that he has some strong friends who can help. Seth feels honored to be called a friend and joins him. Before they can leave, Tifanna arrives and embraces Cain, explaining that his father has issued an emergency order. She wants to go with him, but Cain tells her to stay behind and lead the defense of his hometown. She agrees and Cain rushes into the forest with Seth. Inside the forest, Dalmatia is already engaged in battle, seemingly enjoying the fight. A dragon suddenly appears behind him, but Seth swiftly eliminates it. Cain follows with an inferno spell, wiping out a large number of monsters. However, this draws the attention of Eren, who has been waiting for them. Seth tells Cain to move ahead while he holds off the monsters. Cain hesitates, but Seth assures him he will summon his underlings to assist, though he warns that some of the forest may be destroyed in the process. Cain asks him not to go overboard, but Seth simply smiles and tells him to worry about himself instead. Back in town, Tifanna commands the defenses while Nina senses countless monsters approaching. Millie decides to go into the forest, saying that no matter how strong Cain is, he might still need help. Nina agrees and Claude and Lena follow them, not wanting the two to go alone. Seth summons his 4 demon generals, who are surprised to be called so suddenly. They quickly understand the situation, and Dalmatia explains that they are helping a friend. When they learn that Seth has entered a contract, they are shocked. Dalmatia tells them about Cain, calling him a demigod and the god's chosen one. The generals can hardly believe what they are hearing, but Seth orders them to assist with controlling the monsters. Meanwhile, Cain is taking down as many monsters as he can, but the numbers seem endless. Suddenly, a massive burst of flames heads toward him, which he narrowly counters with his own spell. From the fire emerges a black dragon, Eren. Cain immediately recognizes him. Eren admits he couldn't fully revive his strength but continues his attack, summoning more monsters toward the town. Cain demands he stop, but Eren only calls it a game, saying he wants to see if humanity will survive or be devoured. Cain's friends arrive at the edge of the forest, witnessing the demon generals fighting alongside them. They quickly realize these must be Cain's allies. Even so, the demons struggle to hold back the endless monsters, and Seth tells them they will have to rely on the humans as well. Eren looks closely at Cain and recognizes his eyes. They resemble those of the ones who once sealed him away. Cain realizes Eren is referring to his parents. Eren releases another breath of fire, but Cain dodges and counters with a powerful inferno spell. The attack lands, but Eren laughs, saying that such a weak spell cannot harm him. Cain prepares to use a stronger technique, but Eren attacks before he can finish. As the two clash, Cain summons Haku and Jean to assist. Together, they manage to knock Eren to the ground, but Haku is struck by his tail. Eren unleashes another breath of flames toward Haku, who is saved at the last moment when Jean shields him. Back at the town, Cain's friends continue to fight but begin to tire. They are soon overwhelmed by the monsters until Tifanna and her knights arrive just in time to reinforce them. Meanwhile, Eren continues his relentless assault on Cain's summons. Cain, desperate to protect everyone, activates his father's ultimate skill. Eren recognizes it immediately, it's Emperor-level magic. Cain releases the full attack, clashing with Eren in a blinding explosion of light visible from miles away. Determined to protect everyone, Cain pushes his power to its limit. But suddenly, Haku and Jean bite him, breaking his concentration. Seth and Dalmatia appear, telling him that he's gone too far. The battle is already over. Eren has been completely destroyed, and all remaining monsters have retreated back into the forest. The town is safe. Cain returns to celebrate with his friends, but his relief doesn't last long. The king summons him and scolds him for the massive beam of light that was visible across the entire kingdom. Many citizens even believed it was the coming of a god. Cain apologizes, explaining that he had to use Emperor-level magic to defeat Eren, but the king warns him never to use such devastating magic carelessly again. Despite the warning, the kingdom holds a ceremony in Cain's honor, promoting him to the rank of Viscount and granting him control over the Durantal domain. However, after the ceremony, Tifana reveals that Duranthal is a difficult region where all previous nobles have failed to maintain order because the local adventurers guild has grown too powerful. Telestra wants to protest, but Cain reassures her that it will be fine and says he's excited to develop a new town. His friends believe in him but warn him not to go overboard. Upon arriving in Duranthal, Cain immediately causes a commotion. A guard reports back to the king that Cain visited the Adventurers Guild and completely overwhelmed the adventurers who tried to welcome him. Later at the tavern, when he sees some men mistreating a maid, he intervenes and throws them out, only to be arrested by the guards himself. The king is astonished by the report, though the duke can't help but laugh. Cain later tells Telestra and Silk about his new domain, but Seth suddenly appears, begging for help. He explains that he was kicked out by his wife after being caught cheating. Moments later, his wife arrives to pay her respects to Cain. She asks what Cain thinks about Seth's actions, and Cain says it was wrong, especially since Seth already has such a beautiful wife. She is flattered by his words, but Seth warns Cain that women change after marriage. Telestra and Silk immediately scold him for the remark. Back at the palace, the king receives another report on Cain's activities. Apparently, he has already taken down the Dark Guild and even built a massive wall. When the report continues, it's revealed that Cain has constructed an entire castle. Telestra is stunned, saying it looks even grander than the royal palace itself. Everyone agrees that once again, Cain has gone completely overboard. And that's where this story ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.